So this is a website I ran across by a doctor named Rohan Bowery, and he's developed an instrument to mark toric IOLs to make the positioning easier in patients with poorly dilating pupils. He mentions, the routine techniques that we all use trying to align the toric IOL underneath an iris that's not dilated well. You can push the iris around with instruments. You can use cohesive viscoelastic. But what he came up with was the idea of actually indenting the optic, just like heavy objects indent things. And you can see his instrument here. He has a little kind of a metal peg there that he uses to press on the optic of the IOL right in the center, and that provides an indentation mark in order to orient the IOL, in the presence of a real small pupil. So he indents the IOL right before loading, injects it. He happens to have the Callisto system. He's positioning that without moving the iris around. His system tells him where to align the marks. With us, we actually use either the nubs or sometimes ink. And then he goes on to explain, the benefits of not having to do the routine techniques to manipulate the optic in the presence of a small pupil. So what I decided, I ran across a lens that misfired. There was a scratch on this particular lens. We had to use another lens for this patient. The technician had a hard time loading it. So instead of just sending it back to the company, I thought I'd try this technique, but with a slightly different method. I actually used a Kelman forceps to squeeze, to basically clamp the haptic between the sides of the forceps to see what kind of mark I would get. And I had to do a couple of attempts here. You have to use quite a bit of force to get a mark that's reasonably long. And I just made a couple of attempts here. And finally, I think with the last attempt, I got a mark that was a little bit longer. And this put an indent on both sides of the optic, compared to Dr. Bowery's technique, which just indented one side of it. But anyway, I then immersed the IOL in a cup of balanced salt solution. I wanted to find out, number one, how long the mark lasted, and if it did, in fact, fully, hydrate back so that the mark wouldn't, stay there forever. And so I immersed it in balanced salt, left it there for about 10 minutes, and as you can see, it's a little bit hard from the video, but you could make out the mark. For about a good 2 to 3 minutes, it was apparent where the mark was. After that, it started to fade rapidly. So in my estimation, you'd have about 2 or 3 minutes to align the IOL before the mark faded too much, where it might not be as helpful. But I was trying to move it around in the balanced salt to see if I could discern where I had actually made the indent. And if you look carefully, you can see where it was. Notice, though, that the indent is about 90 degrees from the haptic, and that is going to contrast to when I do the next one, which will be a different orientation. But anyway, I then, after about 10 minutes, took the IOL out of balanced salt to see what the mark looked like, and you can barely see where I indented. If you look carefully, starting at the scratch mark vertically, you can see where the mark was. Then I tried, and I'm showing you both sides of the IOL. I think I flip it over here to see. But it's interesting, it's different than the scratch. The indents actually resolve pretty easily once the lens is rehydrated. But here I'm doing another crimping of the same optic, but the orientation now is more in line slightly with the haptics. I deliberately did it in a different orientation to see how it compared to the first one. And this time I'm using quite a bit of force, and I got a pretty good mark there, again on both sides of the optic. And then I did the same thing. I immersed it in balanced salt solution, and wanted to see again how this reacted. I'm just showing you a better view here, drying the lens off. And yeah, that would be a nice mark to align the lens with. So again, soaking the lens in balanced salt solution, and this time I left it in for over an hour, and I took it out and I wanted to see how it looked after an extended time soaking. And as you can see, it looks very pristine. I was looking as hard as I could, and I didn't see marks really from either indent. And I'll tell you, I have a confession. I actually, before I made this video, I actually crimped this particular lens over about 10 times and hydrated it over and over again, and none of the marks persisted. So what I'm showing you here is a lens that's been quite abused with numerous crimpings and rehydrations, and I was frankly amazed at how clear it remained. Apparently this hydrophobic acrylic material is real resistant to indentations, and once it rehydrates, it bounces right back. There may be even better ways of crimping it, such as using a more rounded tool, such as the shaft of a cannula or the shaft of a Sinskey hook or something, rather than using forceps. But it may be worth trying out. Maybe a spherical lens in a patient with a macular scar, so just in case it leaves some mark or something, it wouldn't affect the vision clinically. Let me know what you think, and maybe this is a technique we can adopt and help us out. Thanks for listening.